Welcome everybody to this seminar organized by Unimont Center of the University of Milan. I am Luca Giupponi. I am a researcher at the University of Milan and I work to the Unimont Center. Today my role is to introduce this seminar and the speaker Dr. Michele Moretti of the Department of Agriculture of University of Pisa, Italy. The topic of this seminar is the value chain contribution to the sustainability of socio-ecological system in mountain areas. And I think that we can begin this seminar, but only one technical information. You must turn off your microphone during the presentation, and only at the end of the presentation there will be a discussion session, and then you can turn on your microphone. I think that we can start the seminar.
Yes, thank you, Luca, for the introduction, and let me thank all the participants to the seminar, and also Unimont for organizing it and inviting me to this evening. So I will just start with sharing my presentation, which I hope it will work. We did it yesterday, so I hope everybody can see it. Just give me a thumbs up if it's working.
Yes,
it works.
Okay, thank you so much, Alex. So yeah, as already Luca introduced you, so the topic of my seminar will be, I will talk you a little bit on the characterize, how we studied and we actually thought of a tool, of a framework actually, that can be used to characterize the contribution of value chain to development, resilience and sustainable development in European mountain areas. But first of all, I would like to just give a few words about me. So I'm Michele Moretti. I am assistant professor at the Department of Agricultural Economics and Rural Policy at the University of Pisa in the Department of Agricultural Food and Environment. And just a couple of numbers of our department in Department of Agriculture, Food and Environment, of Agricultural Sciences is better. So the name is very long, but but simply it's agricultural science. So we count about 900 students, and we have actually 3 bachelor courses, 3 master courses, and 1 PhD school. And as moreover, we have a strong group of you will see quite large group of agricultural economists here in Pisa, and we have created these groups, which is called Pisa Agricultural Economics, where you can find a lot of information and news about what are our research and what we are actually doing in terms of supporting rural agricultural economics and rural development in Tuscany and also abroad. So this is a little bit, it's not, they are not all, but this is quite some representation of the group. So as you can see, we are quite a large group of people working there. And these are very, in a synthesis, very in a snapshot, I will say what are actually the research focus and the key research focuses we are actually involved now, which is, I will say, quite broad, and this is actually justifies a little bit here the number of people that are in this group. So that said, I will go to the focus of our seminar today. So this is actually the outline. So I will be presenting to you the work that we have done in the Moving project, which was an Horizon 2020 project focused on mountain areas all over Europe, and I will be basically introducing a little bit the context of the project, but also of mountain areas, which I know you will know better than me. But then just it's a way to recall some of the characteristics of mountain areas in Europe. I will show you the hypothesis from where we start from, and then the conceptual framework. And then I will just explain to you how we try to apply this conceptual framework to two value chains in the, I would say, in the south of Italy, so located in the area of in the Apennines, in the southern Apennines, so in the Molise region. And then I will go through some of the findings and some policy implication we came out from actually the application of this conceptual frameworks. So first of all, about the moving project. So it was an Horizon 2020 project, which was just finished in August. This August. So so 3 months ago. So it involved actually 23 partners from European member states, but also with associated countries. It was 23 mountain regions actually were represented in the project, and we have been working on 23 case study value chains all over, of course, all over Europe. This is actually the spread of the value chains we have been working on. So the case studies we had in the project, as you can see, there are also differentiated by involving some different actually agri-food products, and also connected with the tourism and public good public good generations by the different value chains. And this is a little bit what was actually the main objective of the project. So it was actually to build capacity in the region and try to develop policy frameworks which can actually support the transition to a resilient and sustainable mountain regions across Europe, using as a lens, I would say, or as a focus, or as a driver of this enabling and development and capacity building process, mountain value chains. For some reason that I will try to explain you while I'm explaining the conceptual framework, actually. So just talking about mountain regions in Europe, I'm sorry for the data. The picture is quite, the map is quite old. I know that there is an updated one, but I didn't have time to find it to put in the presentation. So sorry for that. But actually, mountain areas are quite predominant in the European landscape because actually they cover 36% of the European surface and host about 16% of the European population. Additionally, they have, of course, are home from a great diversity of ecosystem services and land use, and are also provide substantial support for the livelihoods of mountain community, and at the same time they provide essential ecosystem services, both not only for the mountain community, but also for people living in lowlands. But at the same time, as most of your areas in Europe are nowadays, and we will see also this is the problem of depopulation is actually something that is very well described and well taken into account in the long-term vision for rural areas. As all other European rural areas, they suffer from abandonment, both in terms of people living in mountain areas, but also at the same time about businesses leaving mountain areas to reach maybe to be transferred to lowlands, where actually the condition for developing and improving your business is actually might seems more convenient. And actually they are also they used to call it, they are the thermometer of actually the climate change, because they are highly sensitive to the changing climate. So they are facing this in a particular, in very prominent way, these that are two of the most relevant challenges that the society nowadays is actually has to face. Sorry. That said, let's try to have a focus on what's the policy around policy and environment around the European mountain area. So the first thing, it's actually has been released the strategy for rural areas. So the long-term vision for rural areas, now it's 2 years old actually, which is actually promising. It's a promising actually strategy which come as the objective to account for systemic integrated asset base policy to foster the development and sustainable development in the rural areas. And of course, being rural, there are also mountain areas, of course, included in it. But at the same time, we see that there are, talking about the specific policy approaches, which are actually developed, which are actually in place in Europe, I will say. We had, there is a positive effect coming, for example, from the leader, and more currently the community-led local development programs, which are actually definitely the first instrument of local asset-based policy development so bottom-up policy development, the opportunity to do that. At the same time, the needs of mountain areas and rural community actually are not counted almost at all in the cohesion policies, which is the other big instrument that actually is used by the European Commission, set down by the European Commission for development of rural areas. There is a narrow-oriented agricultural rural policy approach in the second pillar of the CAP. So we have some measures of the CAP which address these problems, but not as strongly as it was actually it should have been, sorry. And there is actually no policy that actually at the moment rewards actually the ecosystem protection in mountain areas, besides some of the measure, as I already mentioned you, in the second pillar of the CAP. Sorry. So, and that said, let's try to navigate a little bit the hypothesis that we had in starting with the project. So the hypothesis that actually mountain value chains are able to create value while enhancing the socio-ecological systems sustainability in mountain area through policy environment that is capable to support the actors which are involved in this value chain and actually their practices. So what they do to actually generate value coming from the socio-ecological system. This is the hypothesis, our starting point. And then we actually thought about the challenging. So if this is true, our hypothesis is verified actually. What are the challenges that we have to face that it should be faced by the value chain in that context, in the mountain areas context? First of all, there is a challenge to try to convert socio-ecological system outcomes, which I mean by outcomes, the ecosystem services I mentioned before, the provision of food, the provision of enough income for the supporting the livelihood of the rural of the community, of the mountain communities. This might need to be translated into values. We have also to ensure that the value chain is able to contribute to continuously produce and generates these values. And this is actually looking at the impact, the negative impact that climate change might have in mountain areas, and then by consequence in the value chain. And the other challenge is to try to convert what is non-economic value in terms of both ecosystem services and then cultural heritage and all the things that we have been discussing before to be converted into economic values. So something that can be accounted for, basically. Sorry, and then I will try a little before entering the core of the conceptual framework. I will try to make some points and some definition about the concept that are actually embedded in this conceptual framework. So we talk about value chain and what are value chains. So its definition, they are defined as a network of actors and activities which are geographically localized in a specific place through upstream and downstream linkages, and that actually provide consumers product or services asking in exchange value that has to be distributed within the actors that participated in the value chain. That's a very the first definitions The second one will be about socio-ecological system, which I already mentioned quite a lot in my presentation. So the idea of the socio-ecological system comes from Eleanor Ostrom, and she won actually a Nobel Prize about it, about this describing this complex, concept, and these are actually complex interdependent linked system of people, so human and nature, which are nested around across scales. So this means, as you can see, that they have two components. So the green one in the picture is actually the component of the natural system. So we have resources that coming from the natural system, and the blue one, they are actually the human part of the system, which through systems of governance, and so rules, behaviors, norms, formal and informal, of course, and through actors, which are actually human beings, they somehow take advantage of the natural resources, they work with them, they transform them to generate actually outcomes. Outcomes which might be, of course, a food product, for example, or might be clean air, or something, or everything that can be produced through the through human and natural resources interaction, I would say. And the other two concepts which I already mentioned are connected with the objective actually of the project, which are actually the vulnerability, the concept of vulnerability and resilience, where actually vulnerability can be defined because there are many several definitions actually of vulnerability, but the one we actually used in the project is the propensity of some elements, which can be natural elements or human elements or artifacts, such as to suffer adverse effect when impacted by some hazard event. The resilience, while is refer to the capacity of the socio-ecological system of human and nature combination to actually avoid or withstand the perturbation coming from the hazards event, and the idea, and also the capacity to recover, and so return in a steady state in terms of more biological on ecological definition of resilience, to return to the steady state, so return to the phase or a new phase where they were before. That said, I will try to go through this picture, basically represent to you the conceptual frameworks that we have been developing, try to put together all this concept and try to actually answer, to find a way to how we can actually provide some answers to the hypothesis we have provided at the beginning of the project. So it looks like it hinges on the socio-ecological system framework, because also here you have the two system of human from the dark green, natural system from the lighter green, I would say, and then at the core of the system there is the interaction. So how what is the way we look at this, at the interaction of this system, these two systems? So we look at them looking at the value chain. So we assume that the value chain is actually a way people use actors, human actors, use natural resources to produce and generate some outcome. How they actually do that? By developing, by implementing what it's in social theory, it's called social practices. So by doing things. So I harvest, I produce, I harvest forest fruit. Then I package it. Then I bring it to the shop. So those are actually the practices in terms of social, are defined in terms of social science as social practices. And so these social practices actually can be assembled. When they're assembled in a sequence, they actually generate actually a value chain. A value chain that produces outcomes, which are, of course, as I already anticipated a little bit before, they are not only limited to goods and outcome which have an economic value, as it might be food, for example, or wood in terms of forest, but they produce actually also ecosystem services, which most of the time we know, unfortunately, don't have a market value, or it's very complicated to have a market value. They produce the beauty of the landscapes. They generate well-being for the local community, and they also conserve and generate cultural values within the community. No, so this is a little bit the how we interpret and we put together these two the concepts that I explained to you. I just tried to explain to you before. So what we did then, we took this conceptual framework and we applied it to a very narrow, actually, socio-ecological system, which is called, we call it Alto Molise. So it's basically in the southern part of the Apennine, by actually looking at two different dairy value chains, both producing the same product, actually, which is a PDO. It's a Caciocavallo Silano. It's a PDO, but these two value chains have two different configurations. So there are two different ways the practices, they use different practices, and the two different ways these practices are assembled in the value chain. And so this was actually relevant for us to try to understand how much these differences actually might have an influence on the outcomes of the system, of the value chain itself, as I explained you in the slide before. So what we did in terms of data, so we had 15 in-depth interviews with along actors which are distributed along the value chains, and we also included local authorities and local resource management activity, people involved in local resource management institutions, I will say. So I will just not go through. This is actually a very, let's say, streamlined representation of the value chain as it looked like. So we look about the business model because I say the value chain more or less is can be considered the same. No, they both produce Caciocavallo cheese, but they do using a different model of assembling these practices. And I don't want to go through all the picture because you will be the slide will be distributed. So if you are more interested in this, you can go to look at it. But I just wanted to underline what are this sequence of processes. All right. So the first one, so the model, which we call it business model A, uses mostly extensive breeding and semi-intensive breeding, and uses traditional cheese making practices. So those are the main differences between this and the value chains that you will, the other value chains, which is we call it business model B, which I will show you in the next slide. And then I want to also underline a little bit what are the products, so point your attention on the output of this value chain. So because the important part which you will see, it's a difference. It's actually the last square I highlighted here. So the management of natural resources, pasture maintenance, and carbon sequestration. Because if we look, so we might think about this business model as very a value chain which is particularly pay attention to natural resource management and tradition and local community tradition. Okay, then let's move to the other one. So what I call business model B. Again, you can see I like to point your attention on these two parts of the picture because they have semi-intensive breeding and they use industrial cheese make practices, right? Which actually produce in general overall a different set of outcomes if you remember what was showed in the last slide, because of course they produce dairy, and that's of course the very accountable and monetary valued actually good, increasing profit of course for local farms and local actually enterprises connected with the value chain, and they engage with the tourism development, so they push the development in the tourism. So those are very positive outcome. But what is missing compared to the business model A is actually the outcome in terms of preservation of the natural resources, of the pasture, and carbon sequestration, which of course, as you might, or you know probably better than me, are not accountable in terms of economic term, but on the market, I will say, but that's very relevant for the sustainability, the resilience of the socio-ecological system itself. So this is what actually applying this kind of analysis to these two value chains was able actually to provide to us this kind of information. So what we can then derive from this information, so that we actually apply this framework, we try to extend the value chain analysis, which by definition, by conventional theory, economic theory, only look at actually the flows of information and products, but also monetary flows actually within the value chain, and integrated it with the concept of socio-ecological systems. So where actually we extended a little bit the objective of the analysis, though looking not only at what is able to generate economic monetary income, but also to what is able to generate well-being and sustainability and natural resource preservation. We found out that actually this using and assembling, let's say, these value chains within the socio-ecological system concept actually provides the meso-level approach that is able to capture the interaction between what actually humans do within the value chain and what actually are their effects on the natural environment. And it's quite interesting, as I showed you in the analysis that we did in the value chain description, to understand what are actually the practices and the activities within a value chain which might be able to actually move and change the sustainability and the impacts on the socio-ecological system framework, actually, on the socio-ecological system, on the local socio-ecological system. And actually what we might find out by analyzing the two value chains, that actually value chains that have basically, we can consider basically the same, because they have the same kind of output in terms of, again, what can be sold in the market. So in terms of, they both produce Caciocavallo cheese, which was it's a PDO certified dairy cheese, but actually they doing it in a different way. They might have different outcome on the sustainable development of the local socio-ecological system. And a couple of disclaimers, I will say, I have two. So mountain value chains, first of all, are not only agri-food related, and this was a choice for us to focus on only agri-food related mountain value chains, because of course it was quite easy in that sense to rely to actually connect the natural resource, so the environmental resources, the natural resources on the at the local level, with actually the human intervention and the human activities and what the human do with this value chain. We had quite some issues, because I think that I'm not telling anything new about to you about it, but the point that the administrative boundaries of in mountain areas actually do not equal the mountain ranges boundaries, and this actually was quite an issue, generates quite an issue when we need to define exactly the definition of what is actually the local, what are the boundaries of the local socio-ecological system, because yeah, we might talk about the region or the just city, the village boundaries, but also yeah, of course this was quite a complex issue to try to put exactly define what are the boundaries of the system we need to analyze. And of course that's something, again, something I'm not discovering anything and especially telling anything new to you, the lack, of course, of data, because some of the data are available on mountain areas, but of course they are most of the time, including Eurostat and all the Istat and all the statistical all the statistical agency that collect data, they do relate it to administrative boundaries, which sometimes, of course, overlaps with and are not exactly the same that the mountain ranges. and some policy reflection that I try to put forward coming from all this work and a little bit of 3-4 years of work we had in the project. So that actually what we did in terms of framework, so developing this conceptual analytical framework, actually is able to identify what are the human practices that are able to mobilize natural, economic, and social resources within the context of a socio-ecological system. And these practices are identified, those that are actually able to generate value. Values, again, I put it within brackets because I'm not only talking about economic value, but that's also social and cultural and environmental value. And this is actually quite important to preserve them and try to valorize it if we actually want to get to a sustainable development, to a path of sustainable development, of a resilience of mountain communities and mountain areas. And these frameworks can also be useful, and this actually recognition of what are the activities that actually humans do and realize to using actually the natural resources that are available in certain mountain places might be useful indeed to in the policy development process, no? To actually really address the issue of developing systemic, integrated and assets-based approaches, policies that are able to actually provide effects, concrete effects on the territory. And those, of course, are also in line with what are the goal of the long-term vision, what are the goals defined in the long-term vision. So in the long-term strategy that European Union and the European Commission has put forward for rural areas and actually mountain areas in Europe. And so you can find more detailed information about what I have just told you in this paper, which has been published last year. And actually, that's the end of my presentation, and I hope I was clear enough to let you raise some doubts and question about what I just said, because it will be interesting for me to try to go deep a little bit. So thank you for your attention, and thank you again for being here, and thank you again Unimont for hosting me in this talk.
Thank you, Michele. And now, are there any questions? If you want, you can open your microphone and ask a question to the speaker, or otherwise you can write the question in a chat. Any questions? You can turn on your microphone. Alexi Gunia, you can turn on your microphone. Perfect.
Yes. Yeah. First of all, thank you for your very interesting introduction. And my question is generally about mountains. The question is, does the contribution of value change to the sustainability of socio-ecological systems differ in mountains areas compared to lowland areas? It seems to me, maybe I'm wrong, that there is no principal difference in this model, in this chain explanation between lowland and mountains. Thanks.
So no, yes, actually, so the thing is, the differences I found, it's not on the framework actually, because the framework might be applied everywhere. I will say that's very general application of the framework. What are different from mountains to lowlands, in my opinion, is actually the output of the value chains. But just because mountain areas are that actually nest of way more relevant natural resources than lowland area. And that's, of course, some value chains having, I would say, let's call it between brackets, negative effect on the resource and on the natural resources in mountain areas, as a cascade effect also on lowland areas. And that's more relevant as output. And then they need to be more valorized, the conservation of the natural resources, then we can find it in a lowland area. So it depends actually on the socio-ecological system level you applied it, because then of course the relevance of the socio-ecological systems are very different in mountain areas compared to what we can find in lowlands area.
Yeah, that is yeah, really, yeah, I agree. Thank you very much. And maybe one more question. Yeah, you discussed the boundaries of local socio-ecological systems. It's very important, yeah, everywhere in the world. And but the question is, who should define the boundaries of local socio-ecological systems? External actors like scientists, or maybe local people themselves?
Yeah, that's a very, very nice question. Thank you, Alexi. A lot, really, because it's indeed very relevant, the definition of the boundaries of the socio-ecological system. And actually, I missed to say that. But what we did in the project, we worked with 23 living labs. So they were actually the people living in the communities in the location, in the case study locations, that we asked them to define the socio-ecological system. And actually, I think that's very, very important. And it shouldn't be the scientists to define the socio-ecological system boundaries, but it should the local people living in the mountain areas, because they know definitely way better than what we will ever be able to know what are actually the definition of the boundaries of the system they are living in. That's very, very relevant. And thanks for the question, because allows me to underline this thing that we also approach using the approaches in the project. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, thanks.
Other questions? If you want, you can turn on your microphone and ask a question to the speaker.
Yeah, maybe I would jump in. Thanks so much for the presentation. It was very interesting. I was wondering a bit more about the methodology you used in your assessment, in particular, whether how do you sort of quantify different effects, especially in terms of, you talk about different values, and there's this huge discussion literature on whether we should bring back values to monetary values or whether we should adapt this more multi-criteria analysis. So I was wondering whether you can go a bit into this, and whether also you tried to measure how the different value chains contribute to the issues you were pointing in the beginning. So we have some social issues, for example, depopulation, and then whether you try to then, after you're analyzing the value chain, to in some way quantify or qualitatively assess the effects of different value chains in this sense. And second small question is, as you were underlining before, mountain areas quite often have cascading effects on lowlands. And I was wondering whether you had this issue of determining sort of a threshold or a boundary to the system where you stop accounting for cascading effects, or how you went around this. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Tommaso, I think. Yeah, Tommaso, for the very interesting and very to the point question. So first of all, about the quantification. So we didn't use any quantitative analysis. So it was just a purely qualitative analysis. So we just stopped as a the overall project. Actually, we stopped just at the narratives of the value chains that was provided actually from the people by interviewing them. We did a lot of workshops and foresight exercises. So and all actually the points that you actually analyzed, yeah, and I fully agree that, yeah, to go more in a quantitative sense, it will be required, as you can imagine, a lot of additional work. But we could not do it in the being the size of the project. So 23 value chains and 23 case studies, quite a large number. And yeah, 4 year of project were actually not enough to do that. So we had to stop at the narrative, so at the qualitative analysis, I would say. And definitely, we had also a lot of issues in defining the boundaries of the system and also the boundaries of the cascading effect. And I will say that in a way, at the same time as was mentioned to Alexi before, we actually ask community people to actually identify what are the boundaries of the system and what are the boundaries on the cascading effect, because it's also about the perception, because we had, for example, in the case we had in Tuscany region, it was, yeah, just it's called the region, the mountain region is called Alta Versilia, so it's just about above Versilia, so in inner land of Versilia, so which it's like 30 minutes from the very fancy so Forte dei Marmi, all these kind of places there. And so they are really sensitive to the impact of lowland on their actually living. While, for example, if we go to the Transdanubian mountains, yeah, that's such a huge mountain range that they don't feel that, don't have any perception about it. And so for them, they cannot able to quantify it and to even identify what are the cascading effects that they produce on the land, on the lowland, I will say. And then, yeah, I forgot the last question. Sorry. No, can you, there was another question I remember that you asked me, but don't know if I answered all of your points.
No, I think, yeah, thanks a lot. I think you already answered quite a lot. I was wondering, yeah, maybe you said you had no quantification, but in terms of quality assessment, whether you tried then to qualitatively assess how, for example, yeah, these different value chains and business models affect, for example, yeah, mountain depopulation, I remember was one of the aspects you were, or maybe job creation, or
yeah, we tried to do it qualitatively, but then also I didn't report it in the presentation, because there was actually output of other work we did in the project, because we also work on foresight exercise, so how they should look at the future and what they should happen to the future to be realized. And in that sense, you find in the, of course, always qualitative terms, but what will be the output and the outcome, of course, of the changing in the configuration of the value chains in terms of population and actually other kind of stresses connected to climate change that they are facing at the moment. So, but then in the slides, I will, yeah, I think they will be available on the website. You can find all the links to the moving projects. And then if you are interested, you can always email me, and I will for sure provide you all the so all the document that is available, I will say. And thank you for a very nice question.
Are there other questions? No question? No other question? There are no questions, so I think that we can conclude this webinar. But before I inform you that this seminar has been recorded, and the recording will be uploaded on the Unimont website in the webinar session. So I want to thank you for participating in this seminar, and I want to thank my colleague Michele Moretti for the interesting presentation.
No, thank you, and thank you, Luca, for the coordination. Thank you, Alessia, for arranging it, and thank you all the participants for being listening to me and for the nice questions. Thanks a lot. And if you are more questions, additional question, interest in this kind of approaches to mountain value chains, just email me and I will be more than willing to participate.